it's going to happen. You're going to get there. But once you're there, there's 0% chance you're getting back to where you are here. So enjoy your time here. That time will come. Enjoy your time now. And that's what I would have told myself back then. It's what I still tell myself now. It's what I'll tell you and anybody who's watching this. But that's, enjoy yourself now, because, and tomorrow is not promised to anybody. So let's, make the most of every single day that you have.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Thompson Trash, and stand back with another video. This time, I'm joined by Josh Shernoff from the Premier Streaming Network. So welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
So if we take this back to the very beginning, my friend, where do you first discover wrestling as an overall fan?
Oh, man, people ask me that anytime, like I'll do an interview where they'll kind of, how did you get into the business? How did you start? I don't have that moment. I don't have that, like, this is the earliest one that I remember, but I always go back to what I would imagine it is, which is my great grandmother was babysitting my brother or something along the lines of that. And he went to the video store and he got WrestleMania, I want to say 5. I think that was the two VHS set, which any young fans of yours are like, I have no idea what you're talking about right now. But so he got that. And so the only thing that I could imagine, since he's 2 years older than me, is that I also watched that with him. I have memories of early primetime wrestling, watching that, of course, Superstars and Wrestling Challenge. And then I know, by 1990, I have very clear memories of 1990 of I was already a fan. I was deep in there with SummerSlam 1990 and the whole Hulk Hogan and Earthquake situation where Hogan was taken out and everything. So I remember all of that stuff. I would say 1990 is probably when I became a consistent fan, where I would, now I'm getting the pay-per-views. Prior to that, I think I was just watching maybe from maybe around 88, 89 or so, started watching just little bits here and there, probably more from my brother watching it. But yeah, I don't have that specific match, I don't have that match that changed my life. But I cannot remember a time in my life when I was not a wrestling fan.
So you brought up your brother a few times then. When you start developing your own fandom, is there sort of any, I suppose, competition? Would that be the right word, between you and your brother? Like, where he likes one wrestler and you like another and they're fighting, sort of thing?
You know what? We never really had that. I think we were always kind of on the same page with he was always a big Undertaker fan. Obviously, I have a lot of respect for the Undertaker. Loved watching him as a kid, but for me, I was always a Bret Hart fan. Later on, Shawn Michaels as well, but Bret Hart, going back to the Hart Foundation, back in the tag team days with the Anvil, I was just, for whatever reason, Bret Hart was what jumped out at me as the guy that I attached to. Like I said, tag team days. This is before he was a singles wrestler or anything. So I think we never really had that competitive nature with it, except for when we would then wrestle each other. So we definitely had that. But no, we never really had that, like WrestleMania 6. He loves the Ultimate Warrior. I love Hulk Hogan.
That was the exact scenario I was going to get.
Yeah, we didn't really have that. I think we were always more or less on the same page with our fandom.
So when you are discovering your own sort of fandom, and as the business changes, how does that change your fandoms from like the Hulkamania era to the Job era, for example?
So I actually, last week, I turned 40, which is still weird to say out loud. But if you do the math on that, when my birthday is on in September 28th, my age always lines up with WrestleMania, even though it's the year I'm going to turn a different age. So for instance, I was 39 years old this past year at WrestleMania 39.
Yeah.
So it's always been very easy for me to kind of look back and so go, oh, how old were you at WrestleMania 8? I was 8. Like it's super easy for me to do that. So if you look at it from that standpoint, by the time you get to the Attitude Era, which really I think you could argue kicked off at, people have different arguments. Did it kick off with the double turn of Bret Hart and Steve Austin at WrestleMania 13? Did the Attitude Era, kick off officially when the Austin era began at WrestleMania 14 when he won the championship? But if you look at that again, I'm 13 years old, I'm 14 years old. So the
Yeah.
Attitude Era is following. I was there at the only other WrestleMania in Philly was WrestleMania 15. And I was there with my buddy John, and we were obsessed with it. But again, I'm 15 years old. So if you look, and that's in 1999. So if you look at it, it's almost like anybody my age and give or take a couple years, the business changed with us,
Yeah.
right? I'm now a teenager in the launch of the Attitude Era. So I never had this feeling, people go back to like 1995. And I remember being at the King of the Ring at the Spectrum and just a horrible King of the Ring, 1995, really bad. But I remember having, it was fine to me still. What was I was 11 years old.
Yeah.
So, King Mabel, I wasn't a fan of King Mabel, but I wasn't looking at it like I'm sure a 16-year-old at the time was looking at the WWF going, oh my God, what crap am I watching here? But for
Mm.
me, it was just evolving. And by the time I got to an age where I would have started probably to pull away and go, this isn't really that cool. This really isn't for me. Well, that's when they shifted and things started becoming, cooler, I guess. And so, yeah, so my fandom kind of, I think it grew with me. By the time I was 15, though, is when I started my own wrestling company called the
Oh
Teenage
wow.
Wrestling Foundation. So yeah, it was meant to be like the little league of pro wrestling. That was my like mindset. What we have is like, you'll have like what we call in the States like Pee Wee football,
Mm.
or you'll have your
Little
township
League
baseball,
Baseball.
little league baseball, right? So we'll have all that, and then of course you're 15 years old. You can do theater, right? You can do local theater, community theater. You can do theater in your school. So I kept thinking to myself, and you can wrestle in middle school and high school, and I know now, like even like elementary school age, they'll have amateur wrestling. So in my mind, I'm like, well, all pro wrestling is it's sports and it's theater combined. So I'm allowed to do sports. I'm allowed to be a football player in high school, right? And all the dangers that come with that. And I'm allowed to do theater. Why can't I do pro wrestling? And so the idea was, so we put that together as Teenage Wrestling Foundation. You can see a tiny bit of the championship belt, I think, in the image right there, which was made by Reggie
Yep.
Parks in 1999. And me and my untrained friends rented a ring from Jim Kettner in the ECWA, and we put on a show at my high school, and then we ended up doing a show. And we are coming up on the 24th anniversary. I think, yeah, in about 6 days, 24th anniversary of a show that we did at the Fort Washington Expo Center in Fort Washington, Pennsylvania. And that was a huge event for us. We had like 300 something people. It was 1999. It was the height of pro wrestling. So people would show up to anything wrestling,
Mm.
and it was a lot of local high school kids and stuff coming to support us. And we had a great show. Matches, I'm sure by any definition, were abysmal, as far as in ring, because we didn't know what the hell we were doing. So my fandom at that point, I was kind of off and running until the state athletic commission said, you're not old enough. You can't You can't wrestle in the state of Pennsylvania or run a
Oh
show.
wow.
And so then I kind of sat out until I went to in 2001. I went to the Wild Samoan Training Center and was trained by Off of the Wild Samoan and Samu and Lloyd Anawahi and that whole crew there. And yeah, and then I was off and running into a wrestling career. And you can never, I don't think your fandom can ever be the same once you've been in the ring, once you've taken a bump, once you've run the ropes, because your mindset of everything you see in the ring now, you understand and appreciate on a different
Yeah,
level. So that's kind of, I guess, where my fandom changed to not being able to be as much of just a fan.
I get what you're saying completely there. So I am really curious about this. Taking you back to that moment that the state athletic commission was like, "Sorry, you're not old enough. You can't do this." Did that sort of suck the passion for wrestling for you?
Not for wrestling. It sucked. I can tell you that much. We were less than a week away from a show at this athletic club we were doing. We had booked 2 shows to do because that October '99 show was a huge success. People loved it. We'd been starting to get some training from like some local independent wrestlers and stuff. So we were, feeling really good about ourselves. Again, at the same time, we weren't good in ring as wrestlers, but what we were, believe it or not, a lot of the people that were involved came from the high school theater program.
Mm.
Um, and so what we were really good at was putting on a show and performing. And so people were really enjoying it. And you had people who weren't really wrestling fans, especially at that time. Everyone kind of tuned into wrestling a little, right? So in
Yeah.
'99. Um, but yeah, so when they called and made all kinds of threats that they would have the police will be there to stop you from doing the event and everything. And of course, I'm like, here I am. I think at this point I'm 16 years old, and I'm like, I'm doing this show anyway. And my mom's like, no, you are not. You are not doing this. Um, but no, it didn't sour me on wrestling at all. But what began to sour me on wrestling, the wrestling industry, was the reason why the State Athletic Commission contacted us. And I don't
Ah,
know that I've ever even told the story publicly, but there's a promotion here in Pennsylvania called WWWA, run by a guy named Dino Santa. And Dino had noticed that we had done these shows and seen the posters, I guess. And so we had gone to his shows and stuff before. And he contacted me, wanted to have a meeting, and we met at some pizza place. And he knew everybody, and he put on like this big show. And me and my friend Zach came there to meet with him. And he had this whole idea of, well, I love what you guys are doing, and I want you to be a part of the WWWA, and we'll do all of this together and everything. And then mysteriously, when the State Athletic Commission canceled our show, I get a call from him. Oh, I heard your show was canceled. What happened? Well, I'll tell you what. How about you tell everyone who bought tickets to your show that we'll honor those tickets at our WWWA show, and you and your friends can come and we'll do an invasion angle like anyone would care that the Teenage Wrestling Foundation is
yeah.
invading this other no-name indie. So he's like, we'll do this invasion angle, and you can tell them all those tickets are acceptable. And then this is when he was so gracious. And then we'll just split them 50-50. We'll split the proceeds of it. It didn't take long until I had it confirmed that he was the one who contacted the State Athletic Commission.
I thought that's where this story was
In
going.
his mind, he thought to himself, hey, they're drawing a crowd, not getting that we're not drawing a crowd because we're this great wrestling company. We're drawing a crowd because we're a bunch of kids who are drawing like local high school friends and stuff to come watch us. But he thought, I'll get them shut down and I'll steal them and I'll take whoever's over the age of 18 out of this group and have them wrestle for us. And then he did this whole thing where he had this match and created this title. And then I was supposed to hand the title to one, or he was going to hand it to me or something of the sorts. And anyway, he had his locker room come out and try and attack all of us, and which was not planned.
Oh,
And
really?
so after the show, we're like, well, we're going to get the hell out of here. He takes me aside and he's like, that was great. That was great heat. And let's, next month. And I said to him, I said, there is no next month. We're not doing this again. Like, you didn't tell us at all what was going to happen. And you have to remember, I'm 16. I haven't really been in the business. I've promoted teenage wrestling shows, but I'm not actually in the wrestling business. So this was my first taste of what the wrestling business could be and the slimy, sleazy part of it. And, to this day, I haven't seen him in years and years. I have no respect for Dino Santa and the way that he operated there. Hopefully he's changed in his old age, but look, to me, it was things like that that had me sour on wrestling more than more than anything I was seeing on TV.
No, I get what you're saying.
At least for a while. Then TV got a little, but
Hmm. So when you do start to sour on it as a business, how much of the product are you consuming at this point?
I never stopped until the pandemic.
Okay.
Uh, I just, it was just a routine. I'd be lying if I didn't say that I started fast forwarding once I was able to DVR, shows.
Yeah.
At that point in time, I would, I'd fast forward some of the stuff. Also, I think once I was a trained wrestler, and especially after my time when I was down in OVW, 07 and 08, after that time, it shifted because I had a lot of friends now that were on TV, and I had I hate to say retired, like I had some massive career, but
But I know
I
what you
had
mean.
stopped wrestling. And at that point, yeah, I stopped wrestling in 2008. And, you know, at that point, yeah, I had a chip on my shoulder. It didn't work out the way I wanted it to. I had a neck injury that kind of ended things for me. And I just was a little bitter. I didn't realize I was bitter at the time. Uh, but the guys I traveled with in OVW were Wade Barrett and Drew McIntyre. Um, and I'm sitting back and here's Wade Barrett and starting Nexus, and here's Drew McIntyre's the chosen one, um, and there's a bit of and then of course the guys I wasn't even as close with, but seeing the success of all of those guys, and really just sitting back and going like, okay, so that was my lifelong dream and I failed. And I think there's, again, it's a bitterness that was me. It wasn't really anything the business
Yeah,
was
yeah.
doing. Right. So, but that's when and I'm sorry, I'm waxing poetic, so I forgot your exact question, but that's when, I kind of, I guess, stopped enjoying it as much, if that makes any sense. But I was
Yeah,
still
totally.
watching it. But I think, what I was going to say was, especially for my time in OVW, and the things like Al Snow would explain the matches and learning the inside and out of the match. Sometimes I was able to fast forward through a match, and I could, even while it was, you know, going fast, I could still kind of get it. I got the story, I got what was happening, and I knew when it was time to say, okay, all right, I'll play now, because I know we're getting into something here. Um so yeah, that was my whole thing there, I guess. But I never stopped watching WWE until the pandemic. I just the it was just unbearable. And it's not,
What was it? The
I don't
crowdless?
it was the crowdless part. I don't put the blame on them. Creatively, WWE had not been good for a long time at that point. I think everybody knows that. They knew that. They had the McMahons come out pre-pandemic with the, we're going to change
Oh,
everything.
I
And
forgot about that.
yeah, it hadn't been good. It had been a lot of me just fast forwarding through, but always keeping up to date. Um,
Mhm.
and then that coincided with the start of AEW. And when AEW began, I was fortunate enough to be there for a lot of their stuff. I was there at their first pay-per-view. working backstage and for the another service that I was working for at the time. And I was able to, I hosted the international pre-show before the first Dynamite.
Oh wow.
It was a 2-hour live pre-show in the arena, and interviewing the Bucks and Dustin Rhodes and MJF and all that. So I felt this connection to the AEW locker room. And so at that point, there's only so much time in a week, and I'm really focusing on rooting for what felt like a home team, even though I didn't work there.
But
What
I know
felt
what
like the
you
home
mean.
team. Yeah. And so it made it tough. When the pandemic happened, I felt AEW put on a better presentation. I think having their talent around the ring, with my buddy Austin Gunn just yelling his head off, and the MVP of the pandemic
Yeah.
era, and as he will tell you. But I just found it to be more entertaining and better produced. Having said that, though, man, who can blame WWE for? You can't blame them for anything that happened during the pandemic
No.
era. They were churning out TV. They're making it up as they go along. And I think it just so happened that AEW, personally for me, I was more entertained by that.
I understand what you're saying completely there. There's a lot to unpack in that segment. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
You brought up your time in OVW. So you mentioned that you was trained by the Wild Samoans and people like that. So how did you eventually get signed? I suppose is signed the correct signed to OVW?
I was not signed to OVW.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I paid my own way down there. And so I'd been working the indies, and I'd kind of resurrected my own my promotion. In 2002 and 2003, I was running the TWF, which was Teenage Wrestling Foundation, but now I had just called it TWF, and people go, "What did it stand for?" And I was like, "The Wrestling Federation." Like I just wanted to keep that name. Pretty much, I didn't have enough money to buy a new belt. So I kept this legacy alive. And by 2007, I'm back in the business. I had done a tryout for Ring of Honor, and for Austin Aries was actually the coach at the time, and I was accepted into their school because I never felt ready. It had nothing to do with the training I'd gotten. It was myself. It was how much time I spent wrestling friends as opposed to wrestling people that I didn't know.
That
When
you
you
could
wrestle your
learn from
friends,
almost.
you can't. Yeah, but well, yes, but you feel comfort that you don't necessarily feel. But that comfort zone is your worst enemy. You got to get out there with people that you don't know, and let's say you're wrestling one of your buddies, and that you guys only wrestle each other, and let's say you're a little bit better than him, or he's a little bit better than you. Well, that's the top of how you're going to get. You have to get out of your comfort zone and start wrestling people that are better than you. And so that led me to go like, hey, why don't I try out for Ring of Honor? Because they're certainly better than me. But at that time I decided, now, you know what? I don't want to start all over again with training. I'll just do some stuff on the indies, and took a break here, came back there, but I'm back running my own shows, and it's just not having it's not what it was 5 years earlier. It just wasn't feeling good. And I'm on to really date myself here. I'm on AOL Instant Messenger, and a guy by the name of Kevin Keenan, who's a referee, still a referee. I believe he refs for NWA. I know he refs for WrestlePro. But Kevin was down. He was down developmental. He was wrestling on the ECW brand for WWE at the time. So he was down in OVW, and he kind of was just like, man, what are you doing playing around in the indies? Come down here. And I'm like, well, I'm not signed. And he's like, well, come down and just train down here, and maybe you'll get signed. And so I considered going to the intermediate class, which Rip Rogers was teaching. But then I was like, you know what? If I'm going to come in there, I don't want to come in like some big shot, because I was not working the indies like some of these guys. I was not, multiple times a weekend doing this. So I was like, let me start at the beginning. And I went down there and I joined the beginner class, which was Joey Matthews, Joey Mercury. Was teaching for the first 3 weeks, and then it was Nick Dinsmore, Eugene,
Hmm.
after that. Both great in their own, different, but both great, great teachers. And went down, they, beat the crap out of us and to see who would stay. And I take a lot of pride in the fact that I was able to stay those first 2 days. All they did was just calisthenics, just to try and make you throw up and not come back. Right.
Really dumb
And
question. What are calisthenics?
like squats, push-ups,
Right.
yeah, so lunges, things like that. Um,
I know
so
that sounded dumb. I do apologize.
no, not dumb at all. No, no, it's actually a great question. And I'm also a big fan of don't be the guy who just nods and smiles and acts like you know. Don't be afraid to say I don't know, and that's the only way you're going to learn, right? And I think
Hmm.
that's something that can apply to everybody in all walks of life. But so I was sick as hell when I showed up there. I was like I don't know if it was a bad cold or if it was a flu or whatever it was, but I felt terrible. So I took a lot of pride in the fact that I came back and the next day when I still felt terrible. And maybe it got easier because I was sweating everything out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was down there and yeah, I wasn't signed. And long story short, after being down there for 7 months, WWE came down and said, we're moving to Florida to FCW. And pretty much the words, as I was told, were if you're not 6 foot or taller or Matt Seidel, we're not hiring.
Okay.
And I'm 5'8". And I thought to myself, I'm like, well, I can't get taller and I can't become Matt Seidel. So I'm like, this isn't looking great for me. And that pretty much was the end of my time there. I came home, worked the indies a little bit. I was burnt out, I think mentally, physically, and then the neck issues and stuff that I was having that I'd had for years were taking a toll. And then my final match I had was against this young kid in his first singles match ever. So my last singles match and his first singles match, and his name is Rich Swan.
Oh wow.
Um, and I always let him know, I always remind him that I beat him.
You
So
won your retirement match yet?
yeah, and it speaks to my ego that I won, right? Won on the way out. But I never meant to retire, right? I was like, all right, I'm gonna take a little break. And then I got into doing acting and I got into doing some music and I got into all these other things. And then I was working in real estate and before I knew it, I had like a life, I had a career, I had, and the business was in my rear view mirror. And that was the end of that.
I know exactly what you mean there. So you brought up there the business being in your rearview mirror as you develop what some people would call a regular life. So where's your fandom at this point? As you've left OVW and done the indies, you said you were burned out from being a wrestler, but how much wrestling were you consuming still as a fan or just in general?
Yeah, I think I was still, like I said before, I was watching some of my friends succeed and was always happy for them, but definitely, felt bad about it. And it was something that kind of hung with me for a while, but I never stopped watching. I just didn't I didn't enjoy it as much, but I remember specific moments where I started enjoying things again. And one of them was when Bret Hart came back. Um,
Was that when you got
and
kicked in the nuts by Vince McMahon?
yes, but I
Ah,
remember when he came back, and I remember the time when they announced the host of WrestleMania, and it was The Rock and his big return after 7 years. And it was moments like that where I was kind of like, you know what, I can still be a fan. And then I mean, I don't want to jump ahead. I'll let you kind of steer the ship here, but um, yeah, but that kind of planted the seeds for my uh, fandom regrowing.
so you talk about me steering the ship and your fandom regrowing there. I want to go to your work with, you talked about your work with AEW and things like that. How does your presenting side come about and Premier Streaming Network?
Yeah. So pretty much what happened was in the time when when I stopped wrestling, I got married, had children, had, my career that I was working in real estate, and I started listening to some podcasts, always kind of, I would listen to like Stone Cold's a little bit, or, I was listening to some stuff at the gym. And I'm listening to Jim Ross's Ross Report podcast, and he says something about these great guys over at his good friend Bruce Pritchard and this guy Conrad Thompson doing this Something to Wrestle podcast. I was like, all right, I'll check that out. And anyone who's ever listened to them, I mean, they're just, they're awesome. And so I became a fan of that, and I reached out to my friends that, some of my best friends were all, old TWF people, and still to this day are some of my best friends, and work with me with a lot of stuff now. But I started telling them and my brother, I'm like, guys, you got to listen to this podcast. It's all like wrestle nostalgia, it's all like old stuff from back in the day. And it's, Bruce Pritchard's telling us all these stories. And I remember finding out that the Royal Rumble, Raw, and SmackDown were going to be in Philly. And that would have been 2018. And I remember the end of January, and Something to Wrestle Live was going to happen at the ECW arena. And I said to my wife, I'm like, you know what? I've been out of the business for so long. I've kind of carried around this like bitterness. I'm done with wrestling, with the wrestling business. I just want to go back to being a fan. I have kids now. One day I might want to just, go to a show and watch, wrestling and just enjoy it. And I just want to be a fan. And I went to that show, and it just so happened that Al Snow was a surprise guest. So I got to talk to Al afterwards, who I hadn't seen since OVW. And I always joke about it. Like, it's funny. I was so like at peace with it, of like, I'm just a fan now. 6 months later, I'm back in the business. So what happened was I bumped into Bill Apter, who is a pretty much a lifelong friend. He moved into my neighborhood, him and his family, when I was 9 years old. And Bill Snow, all these, he's just he was a mentor and a friend. And I bumped into him, and we hadn't seen each other in probably about 5 years. We always stayed in touch, but we hadn't actually seen each other in person. And he's telling me, he's like, hey, I'm doing this YouTube show every Wednesday just for fun. I just do this thing where I go on, talk about wrestling. He's like, you should come down next week. Come over. We'll go down to Actors Alley, and we'll record something together. And I'm like, that could be fun. That'd be all right. And he's like, yeah, so I show up, and I'm like, so what are we doing? He's like, oh, well, we're just going to do like a phone call interview. I've got Conrad Thompson coming on to talk about this new StarCast thing he's going to do.
Oh, wow.
And as you remember, Conrad's kind of part of what got me back into my fandom of, so I'm like, oh my God. And I'd already talked to my wife about like, hey, I think I want to talk to some of my friends about going to the StarCast thing. It seems kind of cool. And so we're talking to Conrad, and live on the air there, Bill goes, yeah, you know what? I think we're going to send Josh to StarCast, and he's going to do all kinds of interviews for the After Chat.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, oh, okay. And Conrad's like, yeah, we'd be happy to have you. And so we get off the call, and I'm like, were you serious about that? And he's like, yeah, you should do that. He's like, call Conrad and set it up. I'm like, I don't have Conrad's number. Like, I don't know Conrad. And so long story short, we got it set up, and me and my buddy Calvin went down to the first StarCast with a camera and a microphone and press passes. And I just started interviewing people for the first time ever. And turned out that I was relatively good at doing that. And then I started hosting a podcast with Bill, a weekly podcast called The After Chat. And we did that for a number of months. And through that, I was like, you know what? I want to kind of do something, show my personality a little bit more, show some of my sarcasm a little bit more. So I created So Says Shernoff, which I ended up actually winning the International Academy of Web Television Best Host award for, which is like mind blowing to me. But I did that show, and that caught the attention of Fight. And I ended up airing that show on Fight TV, and I ended up through that just kind of, constantly just being like, hey, is there anything I can do? And I started going to StarCast, paying my own way for all these things. I'm doing work for Fight. They're not paying me anything.
Mm.
I'm just, and I just kept pushing, and hey, if you guys need someone to host something or do this or do that. And then they discovered that I could also I didn't need to be produced when I was doing it, and that I could produce myself, and that I could do a lot of this stuff myself. And I think they realized that I was a lot cheaper than bringing in a whole crew and people to do
Yeah.
this. And that worked my way up into working behind the scenes at that company, and as director of programming there, and then from there, how to get to Premiere. I learned a lot about the streaming industry, and I'm very grateful for my time there. I'm very fortunate for the time that I had there. Um, but I looked at it and said, this can be done differently. Promoters can be treated better. Fans can be catered to better. A workplace, having spent 20 years in with a successful business, as a family business, and I I knew what a culture in a workplace should be,
Mm.
and then I knew what I was experiencing, and so it got to a point with all of that combined where it was time for me to, I'd gotten to experience amazing things. Um, and I worked my ass off, and I'm very proud of the work that I did there. And again, I'm very grateful for the opportunities that I was given. I believe I earned them all. And I like to think I gave it, 110% every time. And then I realized that it was, there were a couple of things that led to me going like, I don't want to do this anymore. I think it's time to move on.
Mm.
Um, and I left. And when I left, I really didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know if I was, I felt pretty confident that I could end up somewhere doing on air stuff. I had some talks with some people about maybe doing something with, Conrad's group with ad free shows and stuff like that. And I knew what my worth was, but I also knew that I had been pretty vocal of like, this is how things should be done.
Yeah.
And then an opportunity presented itself of like, somebody else had left from there, and it was Paul Owen, who's one of the co-founders of Premiere, and my brother, who had been my business partner for 20 years in real estate. And I looked at it, and we're like, there could be something here. My brother presented this opportunity because he had promoted the wrestling showcase. And I know I'm going on and on here, but he had promoted the wrestling showcase event and saw from the
Mm.
promoter's point of view how terribly he was treated. So I saw this. I said, you know what? Maybe I should put my money where my mouth is. If I truly believe that everything I was seeing was not how it should be done, and I could do it better, well, then do it. Then go do it better. And that's what we did. And we created Premiere.
Mm.
And I take a ton of pride in the fact that I know in 8 months of existence, we have done more than any other streaming service has done in that amount of time,
Mm.
or done in years. And I'm very proud of what we have. I'm very, very fortunate to have the amazing team that we have. I'm very fortunate to have the amazing promotions that we have, and the talent that takes pride in being a part of Premiere. So yeah, I'm that's kind of how that came to be. I just felt there was a better way, and I through everything love this business, and I love this the you know I'm passionate about it, and I just think that that's the type of people who need to be curating and kind of keeping this museum of content of pro wrestling content is people who love it and appreciate it.
Something you brought up there was Conrad's team and things like that. So when you do start Premiere and things like that, is there any sort of, and this might cause some problems, but is there sort of any competition aspect with Conrad? Whereas you've got some shows, he's got some shows. There's no competition, no.
No, Conrad is not a petty person. Um, Conrad sees the big picture. Conrad also, I think, has, and this is putting words in his mouth, but I think he respects um, hardworking, honest people.
Mm.
And I think what he saw, what we were doing was creating a streaming service. What he has is kind of a content empire that he's built.
Yeah.
So for us, it was, as an example, let's take something like a Battlefield Pro Wrestling, Alpha
Mm.
Juniors promotion, which we have, which if you haven't checked it out, go to watch on premiere.com right now. Battlefield Pro Wrestling, they put on a great show. Conrad was not in the business of ever having ad-free shows have libraries of these independent pro wrestling companies or
Mm.
airing their live events. So there was no competition in that regard. What we do is different. Now we have podcasts, but at the same time, there have been, I will say, there have been podcasts where I've looked at it and said, okay, I want to get Conrad's blessing on this. Hey, this opportunity's presented itself for us to get this. This is kind of in your wheelhouse. And I've always gotten his blessing with it.
Can
And
you give us an example?
yeah, Ted DiBiase,
Ah,
the $1 Million Man podcast. Because I know, Marcus D'Angelo, happy birthday to him, by the way. It's his birthday today. Marcus D'Angelo, and Dominic D'Angelo, they both work with ad-free shows. Dominic has Rob Van Dam's podcast on our network. So it was kind of like hey man, these opportunities present themselves. Like, are you cool with us taking these podcasts on, or is that, an issue? And listen, Conrad's not hurting for content. Okay. He's doing all right. And his feeling was, if this is where they can be successful and this is going to help you be successful, and it's in no way, shape, or form hurting his business in any way, he was just very supportive of it. And, I feel we've just scratched the surface of the relationship of how we're going to work together. We aired Starcast. Today, as we're recording this, we will now officially, it's outside the 30-day window. So Starcast 6 will now be available to Premiere Plus members. So Starcast 1 through 6, all of it is now available on Premiere. So our relationship is fantastic. And we're just getting started with the things we're going to do together. And I think that what we found was there was no competition. There was
let's
opportunity to
help each other, sort of thing.
opportunity to complement each other. Yeah. And work together and just, everybody comes out successful. The rising tide lifts all ships. That's kind of the mindset I think we both have.
That's very, very cool. So you brought up the podcasts you do have on that network, like the Rob Van Dam, people like Nick Hausman having his show on your network, and people like that. So who are some people in the wrestling media that you're like, I'd love to work with them on Premiere Network and things on Premiere Streaming Network?
Yeah, that's a tough one. We've been really fortunate to have pretty much, anything that we've wanted. Most of them have come to us as an opportunity to take advantage of what we're doing. So, we're very fortunate in that regard. I think that a guy uh, uh like an Al Snow, um, in some form of fashion on the network. Um, I think his mind for the business is just it's incredible. Um, I I think that and he actually he's been doing some cool stuff for wrestlers. The Netflix show, he's been doing some cool stuff over on ad free shows with the Blue Meanie, which I hosted Blue Meanie's podcast for like a year and a half.
Mm.
And so I think, yeah, a guy like Al, and then I think it's kind of the other people that aren't ready yet, like the people who maybe are still active, like we've seen, Adam Copeland now. But you know, I would love to one day have those types of guys contributing. People who are I had mentioned guys like a Wade Barrett or Drew McIntyre. They've got many, many years ahead of them doing, especially I'll say Wade, the fact that he's not in the ring, God, he could be there for the next 30 years, So
Yeah.
it's um so but yeah, it's more like that. I'd like to have, but it's not even so much the big names. I think it's I'll put it out there. I would love to have the Pro Wrestling Guerrilla library.
Mm.
Um, they just don't want to put their stuff on streaming, and I respect that. I don't necessarily get it, but I respect it. We've talked before. I just that's a library that I think fans would really love to be able to enjoy in a way that they currently cannot enjoy it. So I think it's more stuff like that, right? Looking at I was focused on more the podcast side, but yeah, really looking at whatever else is out there that's just content that fans want. And but other than that, I mean, we've got everything you could want, really. I mean, I'm really it sounds so braggadocious, but
I know what you mean.
I'm very proud of what we have at Premiere. So yeah, I don't know. Like I have in front of me, I've got this here, which is a box of DVDs, just tons and tons of DVDs of a library that we cannot announce yet, but a press release will be going out very soon.
When
That
will it be
is
going
that
out,
has
just out of interest? Because you might be able to, because this isn't going out till November.
it's going out in November.
Yeah.
Okay, then yeah, it's the WXW library from
Ooh,
not the Germany one. It's WXW. It's Off of the Wild Samoans company.
that's very cool.
So you will have, for instance, just an example of one of the things that we've put on the service already. That by the time you're seeing this, you'll be able to enjoy. Is a great match, a tag team match with the team of Owen Hart and D'Lo Brown versus local wrestlers, and guest commentators, Mankind and a young man known as The Rock.
That's
So
very cool.
it's right in the middle of the Nation of Domination time period, and there's you'll find Undertaker on here, Rikishi, obviously Samu, Afa, yeah, all of those guys. But yeah, it's an amazing, amazing library that has never ever streamed anywhere. And they just signed a long-term exclusive deal with us, and we are so excited to have them on board. Um, yeah, it's so again, it's stuff like that, right? That's I feel like we've kind of grabbed up
Mm.
pretty much. That's what I'm looking for. It's not a matter of stealing people from anywhere else. It's looking around going, what have people not seen yet? Um,
Mm.
and so yeah, so we're very proud to be able to do that. And that's all these DVDs. So hopefully they're all up there by November when this airs, but they'll at least be a good chunk of them.
That's very, very cool, my friend. Something I'm always curious to know from my guests. You talked about burnout as you were wrestling and things like that. What do you do for burnout when it comes to the content creator? How do you make sure that you get in the right frame of mind to do the content creating thing?
That's a great question. Because I definitely went through some burnout myself. maybe you have as well.
Definitely.
And it's one of the hardest things with content creation is it's almost like 20 minutes after you've put something up, nobody cares anymore. Like it's like, okay, well, what's your next thing? And if you're somebody who really prides yourself like I did on the quality of what I was putting out there, it got to a point like with So Says Shernoff, I stopped it because of how busy I got and because I realized I didn't have time to. So Says Shernoff was a satirical wrestling news show. So I'd have interviews. I had people, Jeff Jarrett, Eric Bischoff, Joel Gertner, Bill Apter, different people on there. But Kenny McIntosh was a great one too. What I was noticing was I didn't have time to write and edit and do the whole first segment monologue anymore. I just didn't. I was too busy with my job with Fight at the time, and um for me, I started sensing that burnout, and I stopped and I said, it is more important to step back and step away, and be able to attack something new, find something else that energizes me, that gets me pumped to do this stuff. And that was part of also that was another aspect of leaving Fight, and was just okay. I'm not I'm not engaged in this because I'm not challenged at all. So keep challenging yourself, and I don't mean keep piling work on yourself like to make it difficult. I mean keep finding a new way to make something interesting. And for me, when I saw, okay, So Says Shernoff is starting to, I looked at it, I said, these shows are not as good as they were before. And I was like, okay, we're going to stop that. And I think that finding that thing that is challenging for you, that excites you, that may even be twice as much work as what you were doing that burnt you out. But when you're excited and passionate about it, you're not going to get that same burnout. You're going to be able to soldier through. So that for me, it's constant. It's knowing when it's time to walk away from something and not letting my pride get in the way, or my fear of what someone else is going to think get in the way. And then on the other side of it, it's being able to find that next thing to keep me motivated, to keep me growing in whatever it is that I'm doing. That helps me stay away from burnout. But also take some time. Don't, mental health is a real thing, and take time for it. One of the most difficult things for me is I can't turn it off if I'm engaged. Like I love what I do,
Yeah.
I can't turn it off. So it's a 24/7 job, and it's always on my mind. So I've even gotten to the point now where I'll go to the gym and I will do like 15 minutes in the sauna. And the reason I'll do that is it forces me. I take my Apple Watch off. I take my headphones, my phone, everything,
I
and
do the
lock it in
same
the
thing with
locker.
swimming, as weird as that sounds.
There you go. Right. It's it's in a locker, and it's just me. And yeah, are my thoughts maybe sometimes still going towards this? Fine. That's okay. But I don't have the outside stuff coming in. Social media, always okay to just turn that crap off and pop back on when you have something to say. Because I look at it and I don't really care what anyone else has to say, because if it's that important, and there's someone I really care about, they're going to send me a message personally. So I don't have to, I don't have to go mining for what's going on. I'll look at someone and go, hey, that's kind of interesting. And then you start to see the comments, and you're just like, nope, I don't even want to. There have been times where I've seen something that's interesting and I've wanted to reshare it and put my own comment to it and just been like, hey man, I really like that. And then I just delete it because I don't even want to welcome the trolls. I just don't want to deal with that. So yeah, man, just burnout is a real thing, and just keep on top of yourself with your mental health, but also just always do what you enjoy doing. And I know that sounds like trust me, there are aspects of my job I don't like. This is not all glorious and wonderful, but if at the core of it, you enjoy what you're doing, if you can look at it and say, man, I would take this job over something else. As an old coworker of mine used to always say, I'm not digging ditches. And I'd say, oh,
Yeah,
how's work
I know
going?
what you mean.
I'm not digging ditches. It can't be that hard. I sit at a desk. It's you always look at it and realize what you're fortunate for, and I'll focus on that. Focus on the positives. I don't know if that answers your question at all, but
No, it
that's
totally does. It totally does, my friend. So you also talked about the bitter side of yourself with how your wrestling career ended and things like that. And
yeah.
I'm just curious to know this. What would if we had a time machine or we had the ability for you to see that bitter person, what would you say to them now? And what do you think they would say about what you're doing now?
I think if they could see what I'm doing now, they'd maybe go, oh yeah, no, that's probably a better thing than wrestling,
Hmm.
than actually wrestling. I remember talking to a friend of mine, a friend that I've known since elementary school. And when I first started doing this stuff and first had the show, and he goes, so you're getting paid now granted, I wasn't getting paid by fight. I was getting paid by sponsors, but, but still, he's like, you're getting paid to talk about wrestling. And I said, yeah. And he's like, I feel like an idiot. He's like, but why didn't anyone think that you should be doing that sooner? It's like, this is what you've been doing your whole life, just talking about
Yeah.
wrestling. And I was like, yeah, I really should have been doing that. I think myself from like that 2008 era
You know what I
would
mean
have
when I
looked at
say
this.
that.
What's that?
You know what I mean when I say that, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think myself from that era would look at what I'm doing now and would be grateful that this is the path that I'm going to end up taking. But if there's something I could say to that guy, it's twofold. There's only one regret, that I don't have really any regrets, because everything leads you to where you are and where you're supposed to be, I believe. Um, but I got injured at the end of my time in OVW. I separated my shoulder in a match. And my whole thought was, they're like, oh, you can't wrestle for a month. And my thought was, I got to get back sooner. I got to get back sooner. I got to get back sooner. What I wish I would have done was say, hey, do you think I could do some guest commentary? Or, hey, do you think I could do some like backstage interviewing? Or is there anyone I could manage? Or, hey, can I sit in the back room by the TVs and watch how you're editing the show? And, but I have my blinders on. And so I
Yeah.
think what I would say to that guy is, take the blinders off. And also now, at the ripe old age of 40, I think what I would say to that 24-year-old is, dude, you have no idea how much time you have.
Yeah.
Because at 24, I thought, oh my God, I'm 24. I am so old. I got to get things moving here. I have to be successful. I've got to do this right now.
Oh, I'm guilty of
And
that, and I am 24.
there you go, man. Then take this to heart, because when I turned 30, I was able to look back and go, oh my God, now I'm 30. Like, dude, I can't believe I thought I was old at 24. And now I look at it at 40 and I go, holy crap, I was so young at 30. Like, and so what I've now been able to do is look at myself now at this age, at 40 years old. And instead of feeling like time's running out, like I always felt when I was younger, I'm able to look at it now and know 10 years from now, I'm going to be 50. And while that doesn't make sense in my brain in some ways, because I feel like I'm 20, but I know now I've been through enough decades as an adult that I know when I'm 50, I am going to look back at being 40 and go, dude, you were so young. You had so much time. And that's what I'm keeping in my mind now. And that's what I would say to myself back then, if I could, is just enjoy yourself. The time is, it's another thing. It's that, my kids always, my daughter always wants to get older. She's like, oh, I want to grow up. I can't wait until I'm old enough to get a car and all that. And I tell her, like, you know, if you're lucky, you get older. If you're lucky, that time is going to come. But no matter what, you will never be able to go back. So you're going to get to that age you want to get to, that,
Don't rush.
it's going to happen. You're going to get there. But once you're there, there's 0% chance you're getting back to where you are here. So enjoy your time here. That time will come. Enjoy your time now. And that's what I would have told myself back then. It's what I still tell myself now. It's what I'll tell you and anybody who's watching this. But that's, enjoy yourself now, because, and tomorrow is not promised to anybody. So let's, make the most of every single day that you have.
Ooh, to be honest, I think the internet cut out there for a second. I think the internet
What's
cut out
that?
there. Sorry, I think the internet cut out for a second, my friend.
Oh, with my poignant comment there. Yeah, my thing was enjoy every moment that you have. That's it. That's my lesson to people.
To be
And
honest,
if you like coffee, get yourself one of these. This is, I'm gonna plug them. Hey, maybe they'll sponsor me. These Ember mugs. My sister got this for me for my birthday. It connects to your phone. There's an app. This coffee is still piping hot, and I've had this for, like, normally I'd be through multiple cups, but since I'm just talking and talking and talking and talking here right now, every time I go to it, it's so hot. So get yourself one of these. Enjoy that nice hot cup of coffee in the morning. Allow yourself to have that. So
that's very, very cool, my friend. But as we look at wrapping this up, Josh, we are going to do a segment I call generic questions. Those of you that have seen my interviews before will know this is where I ask the questions they might be asked on social media, such as Josh's favorite match, favorite overall pay-per-view card, such as Double or Nothing 2019, favorite wrestlers' entrance music, favorite tag team, and favorite wrestler. So what's your favorite match?
All right.
So I'm Josh.
If I had to just say favorite match of all time, would have to be Bret Hart, Steve Austin, WrestleMania 13.
Okay. This is one that comes up a lot, but why does that one speak to you?
It speaks to me because I was such an enormous Bret Hart fan, and I didn't want to be a Stone Cold fan because I loved Bret Hart so much. But it got me. It got me to commit emotionally to the match, and the story was just flawlessly done. Everything felt like it had that sense of urgency to it. It was just a masterpiece of how to tell a story, and not because of all the blood and stuff like that, but it was also a perfect example. There's a lot of blood out there, especially like indie wrestling and stuff. That match shows you, much in the way you mentioned Double or Nothing with Dustin and Cody, which I got to tell you, as far as matches I've seen live in person, that's my favorite. Absolutely my favorite. And I remember watching Dustin come back afterwards, just soaked in blood. And it was, but you could tell his
I imagine that was
so
how are you still alive moment.
Pretty much. I think that's what Mark Henry said to him. Pretty much. But like he went, into the trainer's room and everything. But you could just tell the emotional high he was on from that. And even with all that blood and everything, just because he knew he was a part of something special. But going back to my fandom before, I would say but that's a perfect example. Those are perfect examples of when blood matters. You see now, and I'm not trying to, stir anything with John Moxley or anything like that, but everyone jokes now Moxley bleeds every match and all that stuff.
He just has to breathe when he bleeds, I think is the joke.
It's pointless at this point, right? Like, it means nothing. John Moxley gets busted open, nobody cares. So why are you doing it? That's my feeling on it, is nobody cares. Nobody looks at, oh, Moxley got busted open. Oh man, now I'm even more emotionally invested in this match. They're not. Um, so, that to me, I think the match at WrestleMania 13 with Austin and Brett, that blood mattered. That
Yeah,
blood, had he passed out from the pain and hadn't been bleeding, had there been no blood in that match, you would have been like, oh, he passed out from the pain, whatever. But man, it looked like he passed out from blood loss. It looked like he would like it was an example of why you bleed in a match.
yeah,
And it should also teach you why you don't need to all the time.
I understand what you're saying completely there. What about your favorite overall pay-per-view?
Favorite overall pay-per-view, I'd have to say my gut wants to go with WrestleMania 17. Um, Again, the time of my fandom, the fact that it was, one of the best matches. I had started, I probably shouldn't say that I was 17 when I started training, but I was 17 at the Wild
Eh,
Samoan train. I was at the Wild Samoan Training Center at the time. It was just having that gimmick battle royal was the first time that they really like brought back and acknowledged like the stuff from the past in that way, while mixing with the current stuff. And it was a time where, I mean, WCW had been purchased a week earlier, so everything was like you're on edge with everything. The build up to Rock and Austin was awesome, so the whole night just felt important. um that would have to be my favorite pay-per-view.
fair enough, my friend. What about your favorite wrestler's entrance theme?
Oh, favorite entrance theme is such a tough one. Man, it really kind of depends on the mood, right?
Yeah.
Like it really depends on um what do I think is the best versus what like Bret Hart's theme to me is, you can't like, I don't know that I even have one. I mean, listen, Edge's theme, right? Uh is badass. Cody Rhodes theme is great.
Mhm.
Um I if I had to, I loved Triple H's theme. Um the game theme. I think if I had to say my favorite of all time, um, would probably be DX. I think it checks all the boxes of you know the energy, you could listen to it at the gym if you wanted to, like I think maybe the DX thing.
That's very, very cool, my friend. And then who's your favorite wrestling tag team?
Favorite tag team,
Yes.
um, favorite tag team all time have to be the Hart Foundation,
Mhm.
Brett and Anvil.
Very, very cool. Why do they speak to you as a team?
They were just I don't know, honestly. Maybe it was the pink stood out and made me go, that's an interesting look or whatever. Um, it was the way that they complemented each other, how completely different they were, yet they dressed exactly the same.
I know
So
what you
you could
mean. Yeah.
see they were exactly the same, which almost put an emphasis on how completely opposite they were, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Totally.
Um, so yeah, it'd be like 1990 era Heart Foundation.
And then,
Um,
oh,
and that would have to be why.
and then finally, the biggest generic question, in my opinion, Josh, who is your favorite wrestler of all time?
It's Bret Hart. Nobody, there's no one better. There's just nobody better. And if Bret Hart's number one, then Shawn Michaels is 1A.
Oh, someone
Um,
that can coexist the two. Thank you.
yes. I think my answer is always going to be Bret Hart because of my fandom at the time.
Hmm.
Um, Shawn Michaels, it wasn't until I would say like DX era Shawn Michaels, that not even that, maybe 96 era, like when he beat Bret, that I started going like, okay, he's pretty freaking great. Like he's really good. But I wasn't, well, I always appreciate him. I always loved the Rockers, and I loved, you know, obviously WrestleMania 10 ladder match and stuff like that. So I was a big Shawn Michaels fan, but Bret Hart was the one I was there to see. And if it was, hey, you can go to this show or that show, Shawn Michaels is headlining this one, Bret Hart's headlining that one, I was always going to end up at the Bret Hart one. So that's why he would be my favorite. And also he made everything real. Everything looked and felt real. People criticize his promos. To me, his promos.
My favorite one is when
real.
he pushes Vince McMahon over. You know, do you know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah. What does he say?
This
frustrated. Yeah.
Frustrated ain't the effing word.
Isn't the word. This is, you know, F and BS. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, man. I mean, just everything felt real with him. Nothing ever felt, you know, pre-planned or anything like that. So Bret Hart is my favorite of all time.
That's very, very cool, my friend. So as we wrap this up, Josh, obviously I want to say thank you for a great conversation. But the question that I end all my interviews on is, I believe with podcasting, YouTube, and social media in general, we're all sort of going to live forever in some sort of very strange way. So what is one piece of content you're like, I would like to be remembered for that? And then what is one that you're like, yuck, please don't remember me for that?
Man, I'm sure there's a lot that I don't want to be remembered for. That one day I'm sure people will dig up. Yeah, I've been fortunate to be a part of so many different things. Some of the stuff I think I'd want to be remembered for content wise would be, I'd say, whatever the best episode of So Says Shernoff was. I don't know which one that is. But I think the I'd like to be remembered for what I did then. And I'd like to be remembered for the work I'm doing now on commentary with Dave Sturcio. I think I humbly believe that we are the best commentating duo in wrestling today and in wrestling in the last 20 something years that is not signed to a major company. And I think better than most that are signed to a major company. And that sounds cocky and conceited, but I feel like if you check out the wrestling showcase, the Premier Wrestling Showcase that happened last month, it's on Premier, part of the Premier Plus package. And if you check out any WrestlePro stuff that Dave and I have been doing, I think that you'd be hard pressed to disagree with me. But what I really would like to be remembered for, as far as a piece of content that lives on, I don't think it happened yet. I think the best is yet to come. So I would just say stay tuned, because we got some really, really fun stuff planned. And I think that's the stuff I'm going to want to be remembered for.
That's very, very cool, my friend, and a beautiful way to end this conversation, I feel. So promote yourself. Where can the good people find you, your work, etc.?
Promote myself. I don't know if anybody's listened to me long enough to still be here to listen to what I have to say. No, at So Says Shernoff on all social media. Check us out at watchonpremiere.com, on Twitter or X or whatever the hell. We're at Watch on Premiere, Premiere Streaming Network on Instagram and Facebook. Yeah, and just stay tuned for more. We're constantly growing. We have, you know, champions now in Matt Cardona and Steph DeLander as of this recording. But who knows if, you know, they've got some title defenses coming up for the Premier Championships. And if a show is going to air on Premier, they can defend those championships. So that is exciting too, to see, kind of have those traveling championships. But yeah, we got big stuff planned. We have some really big things planned. So come on for the ride. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun.
It's well worth doing, guys. So if you guys like this, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Tom Talks Trash on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter at Tom Talks Trash, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye now. Thank you.